The Vampire of Wingartentrieba by Art Gaines. Chapter 5. The girl awoke just before they passed through the farm gates of her home. Her father spotted them from the house and shouted inarticulately, "Ah, ah!" throwing his hands into the air. Then he rushed forward, still shouting. Sir Alan brought the horse to a stop and helped the girl slip down to the ground. The father slid to a stop right before his daughter and fell on his knees before her, throwing his arms around her and clutching her tightly. He sobbed in great wailing cries, his head buried in the cloak his daughter had wrapped around her. The mother appeared from somewhere, nearly tripping on herself in her haste, and she too fell on her knees and wrapped her arms around them both. Such was the parents' passion that the girl herself began to weep again, and the only thing that kept her upright was her parents' arms around her. Sir Alan descended from his horse and backed away a bit to let the moment unfold. Feeling little arms around his legs, he looked down to see the brother hugging him. "Thank you for bringing my sister home," the boy said. The knight nodded. "You're very welcome." With gentle pressure, Sir Alan pushed the boy toward the family. The brother came up to them and threw his arms around them all as best he could, though, of course, his reach was not very great. Casting his eyes around the farmyard, Sir Alan spotted a water trough and led his horse over to it. Immediately the horse began to drink deeply. Completely oblivious to him, the family eventually moved into the farmhouse, leaving Sir Alan alone in the yard, save for a few farmhands who had paused in their work to watch the goings-on. They were leaning against the barn or sprawling against fences. When his horse had drunk its fill, Sir Alan led it into the barn and into a clean stable. Then he picked up a bundle of hay, cut the cord that bound it, and deposited it into the stable's feeding trough. A farmhand had followed him into the barn. "Did you slay a vampire?" the lad asked. "Sir," he added, remembering his manners when Sir Alan turned a slow eye toward him. "I did, yes." The young man opened his mouth to ask another question, but held his peace, thinking that perhaps the knight was not in the mood to be interrogated. Sir Alan spoke. "Tell me, lad, does she have a bow? Does the daughter fancy anyone? You or any of the other farmhands? Does anyone fancy her?" The fellow blinked in confusion. "What?" Alan gestured to indicate that it was a simple question. The farmhand seemed to become embarrassed and inarticulate. I, everybody fancies her, sir." He fell silent and did not proffer any more information. Sir Alan nodded knowingly and held up a palm to reassure the farmhand that he had said enough. Moving past the farmhand and back out into the yard again, he spotted a table and chairs where the yard hands probably took their lunch, at least in the warmer seasons, and took a seat. A short while later, the father came out of the farmhouse, spotted him, and came over. Sir Alan remained seated. When he reached him, the farmer looked like he did not know what to say. Sir Alan took a deep breath. There will be time enough for talk when hearts are stilled and eyes are dried. At this moment, I would greatly appreciate a bed, because I am deathly tired, and there is nothing I desire more than to rest. Immediately, the farmer led him into the house and to a room with a simple bed. Alan thought he had probably never seen a more heavenly sight. Turning to the farmer, he said, "I shall probably sleep for, I don't know, but it shall probably be a long time. Please do not disturb me until I emerge." The farmer nodded vigorously and departed, closing the door behind him. Sir Alan barely had the strength to strip off his gear, but he managed to remove most of it, letting it clatter to the floor. Then he knelt beside the bed to say his prayers. He was too exhausted for Latin, so he prayed in Gaelic. As he prayed, his head slowly descended toward the bed until it was resting upon it. He fell fast asleep mid-prayer, still kneeling beside the bed. At some point during the night, Alan roused himself enough to climb properly into bed. It creaked mightily when his full weight bore down upon it, but it withstood his full bulk. After that, he remained dead to the world until the evening of the following day, awaking just in time for supper. The farmer's wife had prepared a feast for everyone, consisting largely of cured ham and fruit pies. Everyone had gathered from the surrounding area, neighbors and farmhands. When the farmer's daughter appeared, dressed in a plain grey dress with a bit of blue and white dye upon the hem by way of decoration, she was greeted with a great cheer. She had washed and slept, and her hair was tidied, and she seemed quite embarrassed by all the commotion. Her priest had also visited earlier in the day, Alan learned, but he had been called away to other business before the celebration began. The farmer insisted the knight take a seat of honor near the head of the table, and the wife was full of apologies for what she felt sure must have been an excessively simple meal for such a great lord as she presumed Sir Alan to be. As he took his seat dressed in a simple tunic he had retrieved from his pack, he reassured her, "Madame, I feel sure I shall enjoy this gathering a great deal more than many a grand banquet I have sat at with great lords and ladies." He meant it too. Everyone there was all smiles and jovialities. They piled their platters high with slices of meat and great scoops of pie. When they began to insist that he tell the story of how he defeated the vampire, Sir Alan reluctantly agreed. It was always advisable to instruct the peasantry in what sort of measures were required in dealing with fey and other worldly evils. He was sparse on the details, but he did not forbear to relate the scriptures and prayers he had brought to mind throughout the ordeal. As he described the vampire, he felt many eyes upon him, wide with amazement. No doubt what he described seemed utterly fantastical to their ears. For Sir Alan, however, the vampire's illusions were far from the most fantastical sorceries he had ever laid eyes upon. When he described his battle with the undead creature, the women covered their faces with their hands, and the men leaned forward with their hands on the table, the better to see Sir Alan's expressions and the gestures he made by way of illustration. At the conclusion of the story, everyone reacted with another rousing cheer. Alan graciously accepted the honor they showed him, but happily tore back into the food before him. At the conclusion of the meal, Sir Alan rose and asked the farmer and his wife to join him outside, as he had some matters to discuss with them in private. The farmer suggested they step into the barn, where it would be warmer than the yard, and together they went. There was a table and chairs in a corner of the barn, and Sir Alan took a seat. The farmer and his wife sat opposite him. The knight leaned toward them, and a look of great seriousness came into his face. "I must now instruct you in the proper care for your daughter from this point on," he began. "Your daughter may have been rescued alive from that vampire's cave, and that vampire is indeed slain, and the transformation has fully been halted in your daughter's flesh, but she is not healed, and she never truly will be. In a way, that creature will always be with her." Sir Alan gestured toward the back of his head. "Carried in the back of her mind, an undead, lifeless thing, always calling to her, 'Become like me.'" The farmer and his wife began to protest, but Sir Alan raised a hand. "I know what you think, that how could such a vile thing ever present any kind of allurement to a girl as sweet and good and obedient as your daughter. But I assure you, I have seen this many times, and far too often the proper precautions are not taken, and the end of the matter is not good." Alan said all this exceedingly slowly to impose the weight of it upon the girl's parents. There is no cure for a vampire's victim, not once he has kissed her and marked her and sullied her mind, but there is something you can do. Feed her on potatoes and butter and bread, and as much red meat as you can manage. Make her know the joy of living, and put some fat on her bones. And above all, make sure she gets married as soon as possible. If you do not do these things, she will go insane. Have her marry some good strong lad with big arms who can pick her up and twirl her around in the air whether she likes it or not. "You have to understand," Sir Alan continued, "her mind and her body are still full of the vampire's poisons. If swift action is not taken, they will begin to fester. She will fall into a kind of bitter melancholy from which she will never recover. The vampire filled her mind with thoughts of being this beautiful, dark, dangerous thing which she will never now be, of knowing dark, seductive pleasures which she will never now know. She must very soon be made to know new pleasures and new delights to cancel out the visions in her head. She must know the delight of nursing a small child upon her breast or bouncing it on her knee. Very soon she must lay each night in the bosom of some strong, lusty lad. These things will fill her with new humours that will counteract the poisons, but she will never be truly free." Sir Alan paused. The farmer and his wife remained silent, absorbing the meaning of his words. Alan continued, "Remember this. She will never forget the vampire's embrace, the power of his hands, nor the intoxication of his kiss. She will carry these things for the rest of her life. Now, with a good, strong Christian fellow as her husband, who will take her by the chin and turn her toward the cross of our Savior whenever dark thoughts intrude, who will flick her nose when she begins to frown and command her to think of pleasant things, only then is there any hope." At hearing of poisons, the farmer spoke. "These poisons you speak of, can they not be leached out of her?" Sir Alan shook his head. I wish that were so. I wish I could have returned your daughter to you exactly as she was, but these are poisons that cling to the blood and the bones and the flesh of women. They are part of her now, having replaced her natural humors. Unnatural desires and thoughts of what might have been will spring unbidden into her mind in the night hours and even in the day. Images of herself as some adamantine ice queen of the nightlands or some such foolishness. But with the big strong arms of some farm boy around her each night and a baby dandling on her knee, these things will engender natural feelings and sentiments within her. She will be saved through childbirth, as the scriptures teach us. The transformation has been halted within her, but there is still terrible danger that if she is not led along the right path, she will consign herself to just as much of a living death, completely devoid of natural human feeling and a heart full of bitterness and malcontent. As she is, her natural feelings now will not lead her to a good place. She must be led. You must take action. The farmer swallowed. Will you take her, sir? I'm sure she would be right with you. The wife nodded and took her husband's hand. Sir Alan snorted, though it was a good-natured sound, and he smiled. What? To be my camp follower? No. She needs someone of her own station and comparable in looks, who will always find her as lovely as a spring day. I'm sure many of those young men out there in the house would do quite well. Are there any of them whom you think would be worthy of your daughter? The farmer looked at his wife briefly, then waggled his head indecisively. A few, perhaps. I'm sure there is, Sir Alan insisted. There must be, and you must make it known what must be done. I would not wait more than a few months for the wedding, and even that might be too long. Do you understand? The farmer nodded. I will see it is done. Alan stood. Good man. Now, if you will excuse me, I must rest again. Tomorrow I will depart. I have decided to return to Holy Sutherlarak. I have been away too long, and I pine for the country of my birth. I have seen too much of the evils of the world, and it has darkened my soul. I am become more pagan than Christian, and thoughts of blood and violence come more readily to my mind than the Psalms. French Caledonia is calling me, and I'm going home. This is the conclusion of The Vampire of Wingartentrieba by Art Gaines. Stay tuned for a second adventure of Sir Alan Daybor, the Fairy War Machine.